Welcome back to another episode of Lost Codex Legends. My name is Jesse, and today we're talking about one particular character who has recently returned to the lore, and I must say, I absolutely adore this character. It is a brand new character, an old character, but brand new, and that character, of course, is the one and only Alonsus Faol. Now, you might be wondering, who is Alonsus Faol? Who is this mysterious character? And a very quick summary for you. Alonsus Faol was the Archbishop of the Alliance during the Second War. If you play a paladin, specifically a human paladin or dwarf paladin, or I guess elf paladin, early elf. Anyway, Alliance paladins, and you're part of the Knights of the Silverhand, well, you have Faol to thank, for he is the one who created that paladin order back during the Second War. And most of all, he was just a loved and very generous man. Many enjoyed his presence. He was very kind, very compassionate, and for someone in a position of power, you know, that wasn't always something everyone saw. So it was, he was definitely a very popular person in the Alliance during his living days. And without further ado, let's talk Alonsus Faol. We first see Faol become a prominent character in the Tides of Darkness book, and during the First War we can presume that he was a bishop of some kind, perhaps a senior bishop, but he grew ever more powerful and ever more popular. As we see, he's an archbishop in the Second War. Alonsus was present with the other leaders in Lordaeron when Lothar arrived to announce that Stormwind had fallen to the Orcish horde. Faol was not only troubled by the loss of Stormwind City, but also by the destruction of Northshire Abbey, and no doubt was bothered and saddened at the terrible fate the clerics there suffered at the hands of the Orcish horde. Determined to make a difference in the face of this Orcish menace and to help the Alliance of Lordaeron in their fight against them, Faol gathered his apprentice, Uther the Lightbringer, and several other priests and brought them to his chapel in Strathel. It was here in Alonsus' chapel in Stratham where he created the first Knights of the Silverhand by arming his priests with armaments of war. He gave his clerics armor, weapons, and wanted them to have a more active role on the field of battle while still being protected, while still not being vulnerable as priests. Despite creating this paladin order, though, Faol did remain a priest. He did not become a paladin himself. He was an elderly man at this point, but he did create the first generation of paladins, or at least human paladins, with Uther the Lightbringer being the first one he blessed. Not only was creating the Knights of the Silverhand an effort to send aid onto the battlefield, but Faol also wanted to help by more traditional methods, by raising funds for the restoration of Stormwind. All in all, Faol was a good guy, and although he wanted to help on the field of battle, his tendencies as a priest often prevailed, especially in the wake of the Second War. After the Second War, Faol worked selflessly and tirelessly to restore Lordaeron to its former glory, and also brought aid to other surrounding nations who suffered during the conflict. He helped raise funds to rebuild Stormwind City. He helped reform the Brotherhood of Northshire, and specifically him and his protege, his young apprentice and very morally good and not questionable at all, Benedictus, helped rebuild the Cathedral of Light in Stormwind. All in all, just a good dude. He did everything that he could. He was a figurehead in not so much politics, but for their religion. But he wasn't all talk. He did a lot. He was a man of action, but also a man of kindness as well. After these events, we see him in a more official capacity in ceremonies and trials and things like that. For example, Faol is the one who leads the ceremony in Stormwind, during which Prince Arthas Menethil becomes a paladin of the Silverhand, and he's also one of the 4 jurors during Tyrion Forging's trial involving Eitrig. Again, he is a powerful figurehead in the state of human kingdoms, and so he's given different ranks or different jobs according to whatever needs to be done. At some point, Faol dies, and there's no reason to believe there was any sort of malpractice behind it, or he was murdered. It's quite possible he just died of old age. He died apparently when Anduin Wrynn was just a child, and we don't actually know the cause, but it was during a time where they were able to build him a gravesite called Faol's Rest, and presumably it definitely was before the plague. Unfortunately, his rest was not peaceful, and he did not avoid the plague altogether, and he was raised into a mindless minion of the Scourge during the collapse of Lordaeron. It's quite possible, since he was buried in a place called Faol's Rest, that someone deliberately raised him, but considering he never appeared before or no one really knew who he was, he would have been the perfect target to send at, I don't know, other human kingdoms or special targets, to send, you know, a formerly beloved, kind, holy, religious man and send him as a mindless minion. That would have been something Arthas definitely would have done, so I don't think Arthas knew that Alonsus Faol was a part of the Scourge. It's quite possible that a bunch of ghouls and just mindless zombies dug him up, threw him in a meat wagon, and then, you know, Necromancer showed up and was put into a pile. You know, you get a raise, and you get a raise, like the Oprah of Necromancers. What a terrible, awful mental image. But either way, at some point, Faol is resurrected and joins the mindless ranks of the Scourge, and no doubt commits terrible crimes and kills innocent people as the Scourge did. But fortunately, Faol regains his sanity along with the Forsaken, led by Sylvanas Windrunner, when they free themselves from the Scourge control. At some point during this period, after the Forsaken had freed themselves, Calia Menethil, who is now fleeing for her life, running for her life, dad's dead, brother's gone crazy, she's fleeing for her life, she runs into Faol, and there's a recognition there. Presumably they knew each other, Calia being the daughter of the king, and Faol being the figurehead, or, you know, the Archbishop of the Alliance. There was no, and, you know, with Arthas's, introduction into the Knights of the Silverhand, there was no doubt a point in which Calia and Faol knew each other, especially if Calia practiced any sort of, I don't know, like priest abilities or light studies before all that happened. She wasn't canonically a priest back then, but we don't know. It's during this reunion in a time of fear and a time of panic that the former Archbishop, shows her that not all undead lost their minds, lost who they once were in life, and that he is very much the same man that she knew once upon a time. This makes Calia understand that the Forsaken and the Scourge are different, that there is a difference among these hordes of undead. There are those with free will, and there are those with, you know, who are part of the Scourge, and even those with free will, not all of them are sane, not all of them are the same people they were, but that doesn't mean not all of them aren't. And in the case of Faol showed that he was the same man that he was in life, and Calia starts to trust him and trust the Forsaken, believing that they deserve dignity and compassion. At this point, she becomes his pupil. This is likely when she started to learn to become a priest, and the two of them went into hiding for some time. Fast forward to Legion, and this is where we meet Faol for the first time. Now, I remember during the Legion beta when Alonsus Faol was data mined and confirmed to be not only a character returning to the lore, but also a follower and a main good character. I remember seeing that questline where he steps out from behind his gravestone at Faol's rest, and he introduces himself, and I remember thinking, oh my god, this guy's a Forsaken? What? And I thought about it. I had never considered the possibility that he was once upon a time a member of the Scourge or a member of the Forsaken. He died beforehand. His gravesite was always there. The thought just never occurred to me. So to see this iconic character, the father of the Silverhand, this beloved character from the books, who died before, you know, World of Warcraft even became a thing, was amazing. I was in shock, and you can imagine my shock when then behind him shows Calia Menethil. Very big reveals both for Calia and Faol returning to the storyline there. He returned after years of absence, hiding in the shadows, and at some point he's been working with Moira Thorison in the shadows to infiltrate and fight against the Twilight's Hammer. He references this during the quest where you go to get Xalatath. After directing the priest adventurer of the Conclave to search for various artifacts, Faol joins up with Moira and Velen in Dalaran, where they then travel to Netherlight Temple. Here, Velen explains that it is a Draenei temple that now serves as a prison for a Void Naru named Soraka the Light Eater. There, Alonsus Faol, Velen, Moira, and a whole bunch of other priests, including the player, cleanse Soraka of her Void Corruption, their Void Corruption, and it changes back to its original state into a normal Naru. To celebrate this great victory, Alonsus changes the prison into the Priest Order Hall. It's not really his to do that, but either way, and promotes the artifact wielder as the leader of the Order. And the first thing on the agenda is to just recruit more priests. And they start recruiting global priests around the world, Scarlet priests, Forsaken priests, Presumably Tauren priests, dwarf priests, priests of all kind are joining this group. Now, while Faol was involved in the recruitment of a bunch of priests, he was also involved in a quest chain involving paladins in the Paladin Class Hall. There's a lot of overlap between the Paladin Class Hall campaign and the Priest Class Hall campaign. A group of priests and paladins are sent to investigate a Legion invasion point in Fellblaze Ingress, which would lead to the demon world known as Niskara. If the Dreadlord Balnazar was there, they would find him, and their goal is to track down Balnazar. Big name for the Dreadlords, and the priests and the paladins are working together. Alonsus gave them the orders to return to the temple at once when they had any information the Conclave could act on. Again, Faol giving command to the paladins, even though he's in the priest class hall, makes total sense. Literally, the paladins are his grandbabies. That's Papa Faol. Meanwhile, he keeps up the recruitment efforts and brings in Shadow Priestess Natalie Celine. She once wielded Xalatath once upon a time, which ensures that the Shadow and the Light work together, and it kind of legitimizes the cult of the Forgotten Shadow. This is a cult previously deemed heretical, that claimed Shadow was as vital to life and the universe as much as the Light. Natalie Celine was the author of the cult's doctrines and papers and teachings, so bringing her into the ranks is definitely not only an iconic priest character, especially for Forsaken, but just goes with the whole balancing aspect. And in the class hall, Velen represents Holy, Moira represents Shadow, and he's kind of right between. He's discipline. He's the balance of life and shadow, whatever it is priests talk about, I guess. But everything did not go well on Niskara, and all those priests and paladins prove useless and get captured. This is an off-screen mission. Efforts are made to free them, in which the player then goes to free them. And in doing so, the Conclave learned that the Legion was planning an attack on Netherlight Temple. They're targeting Velen, they're targeting Netherlight Temple specifically. Faol then asked the priest player to go to Light's Hope Chapel in the Sanctum of the Light, the Paladin class hall, to speak to the War Council there. Again, there's a lot of overlap to the point where they each get to visit each other's class hall, which is actually pretty cool. The Order of the Silverhand agrees to aid the Conclave, and all that remains is preparing for the worst when Balnazar strikes at Netherlight Temple. I didn't explain, but Netherlight Temple isn't on Azeroth. It's literally in the middle of the Twisting Nether. It is far away. So it's definitely... yeah, it's not an actual site on Azeroth, and the Legion can presumably get there easier. And they do, because they find Netherlight Temple, invade it in full force, and Alonsus told the priest to inform the paladins to arrive at the temple at once. With the paladins led by the priest adventurer, Velen tells the Conclave that there is a chance at victory, or so it seems. This is before Balnazar unleashes his true potential in Netherlight Temple, but since it was located in the Twisting Nether, it also meant that this could be the spot where he dies permanently, which would mean a great victory. So now everything's at stake. They can bring down Balnazar permanently right here and now, but Balnazar kind of has the edge. Fortunately for the occupants of Netherlight Temple, that edge doesn't last long, as paladins arrive, as well as the Army of the Light. When they were on Niskara, the priests and paladins, they meet Lothraxion, a light-forged dreadlord, which confused everybody. And he shows up with his ship, with his own ship in the Army of the Light, and they beam on board the Netherlight Temple, and it's Dreadlord versus Lightforged Dreadlord. Really cool. And eventually Balnazar is killed, permanently killed. Balnazar is gone from the lore. Big victory for priests, big victory for paladins here. And to celebrate, Alonsus Faol announces the title of High Priest to the player, as well as becomes one of the followers of the Priest Order Class Hall, thus ending the Class Hall campaign. In the patch where we go back to the Tomb of Sargeras for the second time, Faol was one of the Order Hall champions seen in the cinematic that is talking to Khadgar and Velen. He represents the Priest player in that cinematic. He also has brought to his attention of a curious contagion that is spreading on the coast of High Mountain, and that priests are involved with him and several other priest followers to stop this contagion and eventually help bring the cure to the front lines to help the soldiers. Nothing super important there. Faol really steps up as a main character in the Before the Storm novel, which is the prelude to Battle for Azeroth. After the Legion invasion is over, Faol sets to work on restoring Azeroth as best as he can. Faol graciously welcomes King Anduin Wrynn to Netherlight Temple when Velen and Moira bring him there. Apparently Anduin didn't do his Class Hall campaign during Legion. And this is, of course, they go there because Azeroth is wounded, the giant sword in the ground, and what better way to heal your planet than to recruit a conclave of healers. There he meets Alonsus Faol for the first time, and at first he doesn't know who he is. All he sees is Forsaken and he stops, he freezes, he goes, oh god. So even Anduin, even good boy Anduin has some judgment issues, right? And you know, you look at a walking, talking corpse, it can't be easy, right? This soon changes, however, when Faol introduces himself. He says, you know, I might not be as round as I once was, or as my beard might not be as flowing or fluffy and white as I once was, but I am Alonsus Faol. And Anduin says, oh my god, like, I'm a huge fan, I've read all your works, I have your poster on my wall, like, can I have your autograph? He freaks out. He's still a little bit unnerved because, you know, I think there's a mention of parts of Faol's like skin just kind of flakes off and falls to the ground, and Anduin's a little bit like, But here he is being a cheerful, cracking joke, saying, you know, he's a little bit underfed, like he's literally making self-deprecation jokes about himself, and Anduin's like, okay, this is weird. Unfortunately, Anduin's shock triples when Faol turns around and says, you think that's shocking? Wait till I introduce you to Calia Menethil, which pretty much was Anduin's reaction, was my reaction. And there's this reunion, these iconic characters, the daughter of Taranis Menethil and the son of Varian Rin here, reunited by a iconic Archbishop. It's a really interesting scene because just priests really got spoiled for Before the Storm. One of the coolest scenes is when Faol returns and introduces himself to Anduin here, and it changes his perception of the undead, and he comes to see the Forsaken as ordinary people in another form. He realizes that, all right, maybe I'm a little bit judgmental. Maybe like so many other people in the Alliance. After the Alliance leaders address the Conclave, Alonsus Faol commends Anduin on not only his leadership, but his skills as a priest, and he invites him to sort of address and take part in Conclave affairs whenever he wants. Apparently he doesn't have to do the Class Hall campaign to get recognition. He just gets it by hand there. Whatever. All right, fine. After this, Alonsus was doing his part by going to Horde cities and encouraging their healers to join in on their cause. Of course, this is easier because he's a Forsaken, right? And although he doesn't identify as Horde, visually he doesn't have to say that. He can just encourage the healers of the Horde to partake in this mission to save Azeroth. During this story, Anduin has a lot of realizations about the Forsaken through his conversations with Faol and Calia, and specifically after Will Benton, his teacher, his mentor, his servant, passes away. Will says in his dying moments that he can't see his wife out there. You know, his wife was in Lordaeron, and Anduin has this realization that there must be so many people who died in Lordaeron who still have loved ones that are alive today. And so when he returns to Netherlight Temple to discuss with Faol and Calia the progress of their mission in healing Azeroth, he transitions the conversation to talk about a plan to formalize a gathering between Forsaken and humans, or specifically their human loved ones. Faol even says that he has doubts about the two races' ability to move past their prejudices. Unfortunately, you know, the living is quick to judge. It can't be easy to see a Forsaken, to see not only a living, a walking, talking, sentient corpse, but the walking, talking, sentient corpse of a loved one. That can't be easy. And on the Forsaken side is, you know, that must be really hard to not be seen as who you once were. That must be really hard to see your loved ones shun you and fear you and stare at you in disgust. So it's not an easy difference between them. And even Faol says, this might not work. And although Alonsus is sort of hesitant to participate, Calia encourages him, and Alonsus Faol agrees to work with his fellow priests to lay down the groundwork for this event. Faol travels to the Undercity to relay two messages, one to Sylvanas Windrunner saying, hey, can we set up a meeting between Forsaken and humans? A very bold letter to send. And the other one is to a Forsaken leader of the Forsaken Desolate Council, a governing body in Undercity by the name of Velcinda Benton. It's actually Will Benton's wife, his Anduin's servant, his teacher's wife. She was up in Lordaeron. He was down in Stormwind when the plague hit. She died and became Scourge and then became Forsaken. He obviously lived, and they had no idea. So Alonsus Faol delivers a letter from Anduin to her. When Nathanos Blightcaller reproaches Alonsus for engaging with the Alliance, especially the Alliance High King, Faol retorts that he's simply politically neutral and that he's not a member of the Horde, but simply a priest of the light, which is pretty bold to say in the Undercity, considering free speech is not a thing the Forsaken are known for, but it's Alonsus Faol, so I guess what are you going to do to him? He then remains in the Undercity for a few days after giving the letter to Velcinda to address any questions or concerns about this, proposed gathering. Later on in the story, on one late evening in Stormwind, King Anduin summons High Exarch Turalyon and King Gen Greymane to the Cathedral of Light, and he's really trying to convince them of this meeting, of this gathering, and no one will have it. Velen's for it. No one else will support him. So he summons Turalyon and Greymane to the Cathedral of Light at night, and this is where he reunites them with Alonsus Faol in the cathedral. This is perhaps one of the most powerful scenes in all Warcraft literature. This moment is defining in so many ways because it's a historical moment in that you have this iconic old character like Alonsus Faol, and you've got these old other dogs, literally King Gen Greymane, one of the only remaining king from the original alliance, right? And then Turalyon, one of the original paladins. So you've got three just really old dudes here in this moment. And Gen is outraged that Anduin would traumatize them by using an abomination, an abominable version of an old friend in order to make a point. He thinks Anduin has brought in this flesh puppet of Alonsus Faol to mock them and to prove his point, which is not Anduin-like at all, but it's just Gen being Gen. And he accused Alonsus of manipulating Anduin Wrynn. Faol calmly retorts to Greymane that his hatred of him stems from fear, and not fear of spooky undead people, but fear that if he acknowledges the Forsaken are truly a people and not monsters, then that means he would also be acknowledging that his son died for nothing and weren't killed by monsters. This, of course, is where Turalyon steps in. He sees Faol as a desecration from the body of a good man he once knew, a fake that has taken his form. Again, he thinks that this is an illusion, he thinks that this is some sort of foul magic going on, and almost he stops Gen from attacking, saying they cannot fight on sacred ground. Faol tries to convince Gen that his rage and his pain is prohibiting him from understanding the truth that could help change his perception, see the Forsaken as someone different. But Gen needs to cling to that hatred and that sorrow, as that's what fuels him to fight. That's, the Worgen rely on those emotions. Faol sympathizes with him, but then asks if he would still hate the Forsaken if Faol came to him with a Forsaken version of Liam. This doesn't go well, and Gen is shaken to the core. Gen cannot fathom the idea of an undead version of his son, an undead version of Liam, and unable to face that truth, he howls in fury, transforms, and runs out of the cathedral. Someone should have went after him so he didn't kill a random Stormwind guard, but, it's okay. No one did. After Gen leaves, Turalyon turns to Faol, and he is just stricken with rage, stricken with fury. I'm going to read you an excerpt from Before the Storm, what Turalyon says to Faol. He says, "You blaspheme what was once a good man. You have stolen his form and parade him about, wearing him as if he were a suit of clothing. Your broken mouth is good for nothing save spewing filthy lies. The undead are unholy. Whatever priestly powers they have come from the shadows of the light, not the light itself. If there's anything left in you of that good, kindly man I loved so much, you capering piece of carnage, come to me, and I will blast him into merciful oblivion." Now, Anduin is bewildered. Anduin is kind of going, dude, what? And there's a part right after this where Faol steps closer, closes the distance between them. To Anduin's horror, Faol closed the distance between himself and the paladin. He spread his arms open wide. Turalyon trembled, and his fist clenched, but he did not strike. "Look for the light in me," Faol instructed. "You will find it. And if you do not, then I do beg of you to strike me down. For I would not wish to exist as a broken corpse the light had abandoned." Turalyon's face was hard as stone. It was the unforgiving expression of the righteous doing what they deemed to be the right thing. But then, as Anduin watched, transfixed by the silent struggle going on between belief and faith, that granite expression softened. Turalyon's eyes widened. Then, the radiant golden glow that enveloped both the living and the dead caught the glitter of unshed tears. Joy spread across his face, and then, as Anduin watched, moved beyond the ability to speak, Turalyon, Paladin of the Silverhand, High Exarch of the Army of the Light, dropped to his knees. He begs Faol for forgiveness. Faol, too, was struggling with emotion. "Dear boy," he said in a voice that shook, "dear boy, there is nothing to forgive. There was a time when I would have agreed with you. You were the sole living member of the original order, the last of the only sons I would ever have. I am grateful that I have not lost you, too, not to death, or the void, or to your own limitations." It is this scene that is so incredibly powerful. Easily my favorite scene in the book, and easily probably one of the most powerful and striking scenes in Warcraft literature. One hell of a kudos to Christy Golden for that scene. To have someone like Turalyon, the High Exarch of the Army of the Light, who is so hell-bent in his ways, see a different side. Definitely read Before the Storm if you haven't read Before the Storm. I'm about to spoil the ending for you, by the way. Overjoyed, Turalyon completely changes his mind and supports Anduin's decision to have Forsaken meet with their living family members and offers to help Anduin. Alonsus and his fellow priests attended the gathering to supervise. They were the mediators between Forsaken and human. Sylvana stays at one side, Anduin stays at the other, far away. And this is supposed to be a neutral ground so that the participants can meet in peace. Unfortunately, the gathering, while it starts very happy and wholesome, it ends in complete awful tragedy. And Kalia ends up dying on the battlefield. Kalia's body is taken back to Netherlight Temple. And Alonsus Faol regrets authorizing her participation in the event. He's regretful. He probably thinks to himself, "Why would I have allowed her to go out there?" They were so focused on the Forsaken and the people that didn't really think about what her presence as the heir to Lordaeron, the princess of the Menethil family, now queen, meant by being there, which is why Sylvanas murdered her. Somehow, back in Netherlight Temple, her body was not decomposing. And when Anduin arrives sometimes later, Sara, the Naru, guides both Alonsus Faol and Anduin in a ritual to raise Kalia Menethil back to life with the power of the light, but as an undead. So we have an undead priest, we have a human priest, and a Naru channeling the light together into Kalia Menethil's stone-cold, dead body. Her eyes open, and she is not breathing, not living. Her heart does not beat, but she's there. She's an undead, but she's not forsaken. And that's where Faol's story kind of ends in Before the Storm. Faol is mentioned in the Alliance short story in Battle for Azeroth. As the Night Elves begin to flee Teldrassil for Stormwind after the Horde's invasion of Ashenvale, Anduin mentions sending someone to the Netherlight Temple and asking for the Conclave priests for help for caring for the new Kaldori refugees, saying that he was certain that Faol would be glad to assist them. Very brief mention. And that's all we have so far of Alonsus Faol. A huge role in the Before the Storm book, a significant role in Legion, and a major character in original establishing lore for Warcraft. One of those characters who returns not because they survived death or in any way, but no, he was long dead and he was resurrected, and his whole story becomes that much more fascinating, that much more interesting when he's a Forsaken. He's a moderate Forsaken. He's calm and collected, and it just proves that not all the Forsaken are crazy, not all the Forsaken are insane. He's actually the same man he once was, and he's so dedicated to his faith, and he's so dedicated to the light. It's interesting to see where his storyline's going to go, especially now with Kalia, especially now with the Forsaken not having a leader. Alonsus Faol refers to himself as a Forsaken, but refers to himself not as a member of the Horde. Interesting there. I'm curious to see if he'll join us in Shadowlands. It'd be fun for him to come with us. I want more Alonsus Faol. I want more of him in the story, and I definitely want to see more of him and Kalia. They're a really cool pair. Just everything about Alonsus Faol in Before the Storm, the way Christy Golden wrote him, is just he's this old, scrawny, sarcastic, dead grandpa, and he's amazing. He cracks jokes, and he's calm, and he's collected, and he's a politician in that he's a proper leader, but he's kind, and he's a really bizarre character, especially for Forsaken. And that's why I love him. He's really cool. So I'm excited to see more Alonsus Faol pop up, hopefully in the Shadowlands. If not, more leaning towards the Forsaken storyline. I don't know. I'm excited. And if you guys haven't read Before the Storm, why haven't you read Before the Storm? Go read it. It's amazing. Anduin Wrynn, Calia Menethil, Sylvanas Windrunner, and Alonsus Faol are the main characters. And it's amazing. So if you like Priest, you like Forsaken, this is definitely the book for you. If you like Forsaken, go read Before the Storm, play the Priest Class Hall campaign. It's really cool. And keep your fingers crossed that Alonsus Faol will join us in 9.0 for Shadowland. And thank you for joining me for this episode of Lost Codex Legends featuring Alonsus Faol. I'll see you guys next week. Enjoy 8.3. Enjoy your invasions. If you're running into Nyalotha next week, enjoy the raid. Enjoy all of N'Zoth's goodness, or your new Volpera, or your new Mechanomes, or whatever. Enjoy it all. And we'll see you guys next week for another episode of Lost Codex Legends. Until then, see ya.